without delaying anymore. So thanks for joining in. And today what we are looking at doing is basically looking at covering learning outcome 4 in this unit, which is strategic leadership. So this is going to be the last session on this unit. And the next session that we will look at doing or basically discussing would be the assignment brief and what kind of evidence need to be produced to complete and achieve this unit. Now, what I've done in today's learning outcome is, again, going into, looking at specifically learning outcome 4, which talks about, understanding the ethical decisions which organizations need to make, and in specific, how do they relate to leadership. So the focus would be business ethics is a large field or a unit on its own. So we are not looking at reading into ethics. Again, the emphasis here is the relationship between leadership and ethics, leadership and ethical decision making, and leadership and corporate social responsibility. So the three assessment criteria that we're going to cover and look at the indicative content in this unit would be to look at understanding the role of ethics, corporate social responsibility, and ethical decision making with reference to leadership. So how does leadership influence ethical decision making? How does leadership influence, and how do leaders actually set corporate social responsibility targets in organization? And why is today the concept of 21st century leadership involving sustainable leadership? So there are some definitions, and obviously we will get into understanding the definition, how it came about, when it was proposed initially by United Nations, how it became internationally accepted. And today, most organizations which have global business or operations in different countries, say global operations essentially, would at some stage look at, during the phase of their journey, look at the concept of what is called sustainable leadership. And we look at some of them because we come across this in the news articles. This is something which is all around us, especially for large corporations like Facebook, Google. You look at Apple, Microsoft, wherein the concept of sustainable leadership, generally comes up even in the annual general meetings, the reports that they publish, and also, when we hear of things like, sustainable profits, we look at things which the companies are giving back to community, looking at their ethical responsibility towards environment, usage of natural resources. And in general, one of the sentences that we do come across and these statements that we read, get to hear more often, is that we need to preserve our natural resources so that our future generations can actually, also make use of them. So when we look at the recent campaign of cleaning up the oceans, because 400 million tons of plastic ends up in oceans, and this campaign, which is now being supported by a lot of organizations like Unilever, Procter & Gamble, look at a lot of FMCG organizations, the idea there is of what is called sustainability. And that is where the organizations are pledging their resources in terms of profits they make, and with the profits that they are making, because they're using environmental resources or natural resources, they are being compelled under the corporate social responsibility and sustainability laws by different governments, legislations, to be able to give something back to the society, so that they are producing goods which are environmentally friendly, which do not harm the environment, and that means that we are able to preserve our natural resources for the future generations to come. So these are concepts that we are aware of, but I think what we are going to be looking at studying today would be to look at understanding them by looking into some of the, let's say, the frameworks and models in particular. And these frameworks and models in particular that we look at would allow us to, kind of filter our understanding towards why they are important, and how leaders actually look at putting them to use and practice. So 3 assessment criteria, we'll cover that one by one, but let's get into understanding some of the key terminology first, which will allow us to put things into perspective. So what I'm going to do is, when we look at this particular learning outcome, there are 2 models that we are going to be, frameworks or models that are going to be important that we need to understand. So what we are going to do is basically look at these 2 in detail before we start getting into the assessment criteria. Now, one of the first slides which I want to show essentially is, the ethics and ethical model. So when we talk about, business ethics in particular, I've got some definitions that I've put. So when we look at business ethics in particular, what we want to be able to do is basically define, what is important from the point of view of organization. So when we look at ethics in general, just at the literal meaning of the term ethics, what we mean by that is it should relate to some sort of moral principles, or it is even treated as a branch of science wherein you're dealing with different types of decision making abilities. So in that, what we look at is there are three different models. When we study business ethics, there are three theories or models, literally I think theories in this case, which are accepted or widely accepted across when we talk about ethics in general. So the first approach is the utilitarian model. The second approach is morals, right model, and the third is justice model. Now, these three approaches are basically applied when we look at, the concept of CSR or corporate social responsibility within the organization. Now, all these three approaches or three models are quite different. So the utilitarian model or approach basically looks at an ethical decision, which, is the one that produces greater good for the greatest number of people. So sometimes leaders will have to make decisions which are going to be in general beneficial for the organization. So they might not encompass 100% of the staff or employees. They might not be beneficial for 100%, but sometimes decisions when they are taken for the greater good of mass public, or number of employees in staff or employees within the organization. Sometimes those decisions are based on the utilitarian model, which means that it does not cover 100% of the staff, employees, or the people or individuals involved, but generally decisions taken are from a sense that they will cause or lead to greater good for a number of people from an organization business point of view. Moral rights model is a decision wherein it basically is the one that best maintains and protects the fundamental rights and privileges of the people. That means sometimes leaders will have to take decisions in the business or organization wherein they will need to look at protecting the fundamental rights and privileges of the people that they already enjoy. And in those cases, those decisions are more influenced by morality rather than ethical side of things. And when we look at morality, what we mean is that here we are looking at certain principles which are clearly, distinguishing between right and wrong, good and bad behavior. So moral would be, would you behave correctly or would you behave, incorrectly? Would you do something good or would you do something bad? And that is where the decisions, when we look at moral rights model, are towards looking at protecting the fundamental rights and privileges of people or staff, employees within the organization. Now, when I look at the justice model, which is a third approach, in this case, the ethical decision is one which distributes the benefits and harm amongst the stakeholders in a fair, equitable, and impartial way. That means if the company is to embark on a decision which leads to creation of wealth, but with the creation of wealth, it also leads to certain, drawbacks in the sense that it will lead to, say, more taxation, or, for example, more stricter legislation being applied by governments across the globe. Then in those cases, what tends to happen is, what we use the term is share the proceeds. That means sometimes decisions are taken by leaders wherein obviously they know that there is not going to be 100% good, but because of the decision being taken, there could be some repercussions and drawbacks, and these are then shared equally amongst all the beneficiaries of that decision. So the justice model looks at primarily saying that, okay, if we make profits, then we make profit over all, whether it's stakeholders, shareholders, employees, partners, suppliers. And if we get a fine, or if we get say, for example, a reprimand, or if we do not follow a legislation, then it is a principal decision taken at the management level, and that could also impact all the other stakeholders because the decision is maybe not right or not ethically correct with regards to the legislation and regulation in that particular geography. So these three models we need to have a very broad understanding of, because when we talk about leadership, leaders sometimes are called to make different types of decisions. And when they make different types of decisions, we can relate them to three different types of ethical decision making that they normally employ or can employ. There can be a combined approach of all the three different approaches as well. But generally speaking, they are considered and accepted in the market. And when we talk about these approaches, whether it's the utilitarian approach, the morals right approach, or the Csr model approach, there are different definitions and different advantages and disadvantages of these kind of decisions being taken when we look at the ethics side of the things. Now, the second thing that we want to understand and look at from a point of view of this particular learning outcome, wherein we are looking at ethical decision making and how leaders help in creation of some sort of a value for the organization. What we need to understand is that basically leadership, people who are in leadership within any organization, business, wherever they are, public, private sector, whatever it is, they have these leadership positions wield certain power. And with power, you get responsibilities. So when we look at the aspect of somebody having power and also then having the ability to exercise that power, this particular concept of how leader then behaves within the organization and leads the team or leads the organization was actually, let's say there was a research and a study which was done, and this research and a study which was done by French and Raven in the 1950s basically came out with they proposed a particular model that there are different sources of power when you are in a leadership position, and these sources of power can be exercised in different ways, which can lead to different outcomes within the organization. So this particular theory of power and influence, which French and Raven actually proposed, later on was refined, and obviously they were divided into two different types of powers: positional power and personal power. And personal power is primarily because of the traits, the skills that you have, and positional power is power which is directly wielding from the position or the authority or the title that you have in the organization. So when we look at this particular framework, this tries to classify the main sources of power which leaders will have within the organization, and what kind of perception would these powers create in the minds of employees or staff, and how does the leader lead the organization by usage of these powers is basically something that we study within the power and influence framework, which is also called the French and Raven's theoretical framework for power and influence. Now, the main aspect of this is that when we try and look at, say, for example, how leaders actually use certain powers, and I'll give you an example here, would be that sometimes you would see, we've heard of this term called carrot and stick approach. Sometimes people in the position of authority, your supervisors or your managers, if you're supervising staff, you normally sometimes end up using a carrot and stick approach. And this is a very crude way of saying that, is basically power and influence model, but it's a very crude way of saying that I'm using a carrot and stick approach. Now, if I relate that carrot and stick approach to reward power, which is one of the types of powers which the leader can wield in the organization, then this classification that we get to hear and we know about it, and we basically go through it on a day-to-day basis, or within the working within the organization, can actually be related to positional power and personal power. So when I say reward power, what the leader is trying to do, or your manager is trying to essentially do, is basically reward you to show certain types of characteristics or behavior in the organization. And for that behavior, the leader is rewarding you with some additional responsibility or additional work, which allows you to differentiate what you do from your colleagues or peers within the organization. So in this case, what the classification of power and influence matrix does, or the theory does, is that it divides it into two different types. And some powers that leaders can get in the organization tend to be positional. That means they are related to the title or the work or the office they occupy. And then some of them could be basically on the basis of their personal skills, traits, and the behavior they show, the prior experience they have, and they are classified under personal power. Now we'll go into a bit of detail in this when we cover one of the assessment criteria. So at this stage, what I want you to understand is that when we look at this particular framework, this is also called the power and influence framework, and leadership typically uses this framework, knowingly or unknowingly. And when you start wielding some of these types of powers, whether it's reward, whether it's coercive, whether it's legitimate, expert or referent power, this is basically relating to this framework, which is the French and Raven's theory or framework that they researched on, and then they propose these main sources of power when people are in position of supervision, able to provide supervision, managerial positions, or in leadership positions within the organization. The next concept that we will look at in general will be, sustainable leadership. And there's a handout which I would suggest that you read from Russell Associates, which is primarily going to be up on Moodle. And this framework, this particular handout will give you a good insight into why large organizations today, which are let's put it this way, large organizations or global organizations which are profitable, and are able to, let me rephrase this sentence. I would like to say that large organizations which are, extremely profitable, and they are able to provide products, goods and services which are in demand, are coming under increasing pressure to show sustainable leadership. The reason is that there are some organizations which are making excessive profits, and this is then raising, questions that the organizations are making excessive profits without caring for the environment, without caring for people, without caring for resources. And this is leading to has led to the rise in the early 1980s, 90s to the concept of sustainable leadership, which has become and has come to the forefront now, really, in the 21st century. So when we talk about sustainable leadership, what we are talking about essentially is that here, leaders who basically lead companies or organizations are going to be expected to focus on the various aspects of, looking at making decisions with regards to ethical decision making to protect the environment, looking at giving something back to the society, and ensuring that the company is not just going after profits or making, excessive profits, but they are doing it in a way wherein it's morally, ethically, something which is sustainable in the long term, for the development of not just the organization, but also for society, people, and environment in general. Now, when we talk about, and when we've read, I'm pretty sure that most of you would have read and seen or heard in the news that sometimes, companies associate, with, let's say, giving something back to the community. They associate with, campaigns, or come out with promotions, or come out with programs essentially, which are looking at giving back to the community. So when you look at Procter and Gamble's campaign, when you buy nappies, baby nappies. So each pack of baby nappies that you buy, 5 penny from that nappy actually goes to providing safe drinking water to, communities in Africa. Now, there are lots of examples of such companies which are looking at, giving something back to the society. And what they've done is they've integrated this as a plan which comes under what is called corporate social responsibility. That means as organizations, they want to develop further, and prosper with ethics and responsibilities which will not just sustain the environment, but look at giving some benefits to the society or the community they work in, and in the long run also create sustainable business practice and business, for the organization, because there are requirements of stakeholders and shareholders and things. So for its stakeholders, it looks at returning profits or returning on some of the objectives, but at the same time, what they're looking at is they're focused on the fact that it needs to be able to produce goods and services which the communities want, which the society wants, but at a rate and a pace at which they are being produced. It's environmentally sustainable. It is environmentally friendly. It is not causing pollution. It is minimizing the waste which is going to the landfill, and it is using raw material in a moral and ethical way wherein the environment is also protected. So a lot of companies, one of the other things that you would note is a lot of companies, when you look at tissues that we use, the toilet tissues that we use, or the toilet roll that we use, the tissue rolls, what you will see is a lot of companies also look at planting trees, because paper essentially comes from trees. So as a long-term objective of some of these companies, in order to look at sustainability and the leadership, that means the role they want to be seen in general, that they are say acting in terms of ensuring that the environment is conserved. What most of these companies do is, which are utilizing large amounts of paper or are in the process of utilizing paper because of paper manufacturing products, they are looking at replanting lots of trees from where they get the the wood, and that is in order to ensure there is sustainability in the environment. So in general, this concept, when applied to organization or pan organization, and it is coming from top bottom, that means it's coming from the leadership, it's coming from the top management of the organization, and it is incorporated into their agenda, into their vision and mission, then would be termed as what is called the company's leading an agenda of sustainability. And because it shows leadership in that, or say takes the lead in showing that taking those steps in order to ensure sustainability, this concept will then be related to sustainable leadership. Now, when we talk about this concept of sustainable leadership, one of the key frameworks that we also need to learn and know about is basically the triple bottom line. It's called the TBL. Now, the triple bottom line concept originally came across as a concept which was proposed by John Ilkington. He's a management guru, a British management guru, and he was working with American companies, and that is where he came up with this concept that a lot of organizations today need to look at, not just running after profits and, say looking at returning profits to stakeholders, but they need to be looking at the overall aspect of producing the goods and services. And the overall aspect of producing goods and services comes across when you understand what impact does it have on the planet, what impact does it have on the people which work within the organization or communities that you work with. So that's the social aspect, the planet aspect, the environmental aspect, and what profits do you make. So when he proposed, what he proposed was that in order to know the true cost of production of a goods and service, or if you're providing a good and service, if you want to know what is the true cost of the product which you are incurring, you need to incorporate not just the aspect of the employee cost and resources cost, but you need to look at the costs from a perspective of three different angles. One is planet, the other is people or community, social aspect of it, and the third is actually the profits that you're generating from the business. So when it started off, he basically proposed the idea that when we look at this concept of accountability for organizations, we need to look at the social, environmental, and financial aspects. And in terms of incorporating all these three in order to ensure that the business is able to, produce value, and that value is being produced at all the three levels. It is the business produces, say, for example, less waste, or there is an economical use of raw material, natural resources. So that will be oriented towards the planet. If it takes care of its employees and it returns back to the community in terms of contributions from a point of view of charitable purposes, corporate social responsibility purposes, then it is considering the people's aspect of it. And then at the same time, most businesses are established to generate profits. So it looks at profitability from all the different angles, whether it's government, whether it's meeting the legislation, whether it's stakeholders, employees, shareholders. So you're returning the profit. You're looking at the profit side of things also from a view wherein you're considering all the elements which would share the proceeds of the benefits of the profitability which the company produces by selling its goods and services. So he created and proposed a bit of an equation that companies today need to look at this concept of considering the total value, and the total value or the total cost which is incurred to produce the goods and service needs to look at these three combinations, which is people, planet, and profit. And that is where the overall cost of the the full cost or the overall cost of producing that good or doing business is actually calculatable. So from that point of view, this concept has become quite important in large organizations today, and they look at these three aspects of planet, profit, and people or community in general to be able to ensure that any new product, any new service, any setting up a new production plant, or looking at practices which would benefit. If they're starting something new, then they would need to look at practices which will benefit all the three aspects of the three P's that we call it, and that is where this concept of the triple bottom line actually comes in. Now, if I just briefly expand, in terms of when we talk about some of these terms, and when organizations look at showing or taking lead in terms of meeting with some of these requirements, which we get to read and hear, quite often, they would come across in different terms. So when we look at CSR, or corporate social responsibility, today that basically encompasses all these concepts that we talk about. So when we talk about triple bottom line, it should straight away click in your mind that, okay, we are talking about sustainability. We are talking about the overall cost of producing the goods or doing the business. When we talk about ethical management and leadership, we are talking about things like fair trade. So sometimes we come across this term, it's a fair trade coffee, or it's a fair trade, you're buying something which is fair trade. That means if you're buying bananas, if you're buying coffee, if you're buying tea, you're ensuring as an organization, if you're producing or you are one of the ones who are sourcing this from the farmers directly, then you're paying a fair price for their production, or the fair price for the goods that you're buying from them, which in turn allows the farmers to basically use the proceeds to be profitable, or at least get some let's say get a fair value for the fair value or fair returns in terms of what they've invested to produce that output. When you look at things like sustainability, carbon neutral, you look at things like corporate governance, social enterprise. When you look at organizations also looking at a work-life balance, that means the organizations today, essentially see human resources as one of the assets. And when you look at HR and human resources as an asset, most companies are looking at people as their valuable resource, one of their valuable resource. So in order to ensure that the value of the human resource is preserved, and they can get that utility, productivity, efficiency from that person, and the person continues to work within the company, there is a concept of work-life balance which a lot of companies are promoting. Some companies and organizations today have gyms, let's say shower facilities. Some of these things are available within the offices. Some companies in the UK in particular also have a scheme wherein they, if you want to bike to your office, then under the bike scheme, a company can sponsor your bike, or there are funds which are made available from the government, because you're looking at being carbon neutral. It promotes good health and obviously well-being, and that is where organizations are putting these policies in place which allow well-being at work, and the work-life balance also being taken into account from a point of view of looking at corporate social responsibility and the whole idea of sustainable leadership. So these are some of the topics that we could see which are related to either ethics, or it is related to, for example, sustainable leadership. Or in why do I use the term sustainable leadership is because there is no way these policies can be put into practice without the buy-in from the management. So when you look at cafeterias, when you look at discounted food stalls within large organizations, when you look at Google, Facebook, Microsoft, you look at Infosys, large organizations wherein they have huge campuses and they have facilities which are provided to employees within the premises itself, whether it's gym, whether it's, for example, recreational facilities, shower facilities, all the other incentives which the organization is trying to give out for its employees. And the reason why they want to look at is they want to look at returning something back to the employee who works who works hard, delivers certain services, works on a particular job role and responsibility, and that is where they're trying to build that concept in of work-life balance, the organization giving something back to the employee and ensuring that they have a psychological contract or a contract in which they are concerned about the well-being of the individual, because they consider some of the organizations, when you look at financial services, you look at software companies, there the main asset is people. And if they do not take care of that resource as people, then the company could lose business in the future. If the employees to leave the organization, become unwell, that is where the work-life balance is being proposed. And obviously you get to see this working within, as an example, within the organizations. So when we talk about the last learning outcome, which is primarily ethical decision making and the importance of leadership and how it relates to ethics, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, these are some main concepts that we are going to be focused on, which is triple bottom line, and the French and Raven's power and influence model, which will be applied in some of the assessment criteria that we look at studying. Now, any questions at this stage? Any questions, any doubts at this stage? All right. So let's look at getting into some of the assessment criteria now, in order to understand, how some of these are going to be addressed when we look at this particular outcome. Now, the first one basically focuses on, looking at you exploring the, the power influence matrix. So here, what we have to look at is understand how leadership, basically uses the power influence matrix, or people in leadership position use this within the organization to get things done, or to basically, get people to go behind them and obviously, follow them as leaders and then deliver on the organizational objectives. Now, a couple of things that we want to look at essentially is that when we look at why, leaders do need power, and when certain titles and responsibilities that you assume within the organization, why are they considered, positions of power? And when we look at these, the idea there is to try and understand that sometimes people, when they are dealing with complex issues or issues which transform or transgress boundaries, there is a lot of pressure on the top management to basically look at delivering on the objectives of the organization. And these objectives, when they have to deliver, there is obviously currently a lot of pressure on leaders within, or when I say the top brass of the organization in general, to be able to look at the concept wherein the companies are exercising or delivering on their goods and services, or producing goods and services, but they are doing it in the aspect wherein it is profitable not just for the company but for the society, and also in the long run it is beneficial for the environment. So when I look at this particular assessment criteria, what we need to do is use examples to explain how leadership influences power and uses power and influence in the whole aspect of let's say working or delegating on leadership. So an example that I would normally look at here would be that when you just to put this into a bit of perspective, when you see a policeman, the example that I've used here is when you see a policeman essentially, using power to basically put people or ask people to follow traffic rules, for example. So in that case, when we look at this as an example, this one is the power which the person is actually yielding because of his position. So here, this would be related to the fact that this power or the authority which the person actually exercises is because of the position the person is in, and is able to direct the traffic, or for example ask the people to be able to follow that norm. And this power is exercised because of positional influence, and this is legitimized because of the fact that the person is working in police and is responsible for maintaining law and order, or traffic law and order as far as the roads are concerned. Now, if you see that this particular power is available with the person, but it is not backed up by legitimation, that means sometimes what you see is that there are community police officers, or as we say here, people who get together and obviously look at providing assistance in the case of, policing within the communities. And they are called community police officers in the UK, for example. And what we do get to see sometimes they do not have the power to arrest or, give out a fine, because they are doing this particular aspect of, as we call them bobbies here, is voluntarily. So if they are seen as an extension of police, but they are seen as an extension because they are voluntarily providing these services, then in those cases, the power which the policeman exercises is not legitimized. That means it's not something which is, written or, given on paper, and that is where they do not have the right to be able to exercise fines or arrest. So if a community police officer finds that there is a crime happening or there is something which needs to be reported, they cannot arrest or issue a warrant, but they in turn have to call the local police or the police station to be able to get that implemented. So here, when we look at power, essentially provides the influence and the ability to influence people and their behavior within the organization. And when you see that this power allows you to exercise your influence and get things done, you would generally see that these when I say these, what I mean by that is that there are 2 or 3 different types of power which your title, your job position, your role within the organization can give you, and those are classified as positional powers. And when we look at personal powers, sometimes you get to see that even if you are working, as a senior in the organization, and you work with a lot of different types of teams and people, but even though you're not in the position of power, when I say you're not in the position of power, means that the person or the organization that you're dealing with or department that you're dealing with does not report to you directly, is not answerable or responsible to you directly, but you're still able to get things done or get things moving, is because you're using your personal traits, which is your skills, your abilities, your prior experience, to be able to get things done. And here, in this case, the power that you have to be able to get things done, which can be exercised on the basis of either having an expert knowledge, that means you have lots of knowledge or maybe subject knowledge in that area, or it could be something which is related to power which is stemming from your background, your experience, your character, your trait, your personality, and that allows the person, it could be your charisma, it could be your image, it could be anything which is one of your personal traits or attribute, and that allows you to get work done, would be classified into the second type of power which French and Raven actually proposed, and that is called the personal power. Now, what we want to be able to do in this particular task is basically take up an example on first theoretically explain the different power influence matrix which French and Raven have proposed. So we look at this 5 or 6 different types. Initially there were 5 which was proposed, then they were obviously modified to 6, and in some cases we also see an extrapolation to 7 different types, but the 2 main categorizations remain the same, which is the positional power and personal power. So these powers that are exercised and are basically available to people in leadership position can be grouped into 2 categories, positional and personal. Now there are these 6 power sources which we have explained in the slides, which give you an idea in terms of what you mean by legitimate power, referent power, expert power, reward power, cohesive power, and informational power. So let's look at 1 or 2 examples to just quickly discuss this, to see if we understand the meaning and the connotation in terms of where and how they're applied. Now, the simplest one that we want to understand is when I say you have legitimate power, that means you have power because of the legitimacy of your title or position in the organization that you hold. So if you're the CEO, you have a power and everybody has to listen to you because you're the topmost person. Or if you're the head of department, then you have that power wherein people working under you are responsible to you, answerable to you, and you have what is a power which is called legitimate power, because it is the power that you have because of your title, your position, and in that power, there are certain responsibilities. In that position, there are certain powers that you have which you require to execute your responsibilities, and that is where you can also use your authority to basically, then delegate this power. So, for example, if you're going on a business trip or you're away on a holiday, then somebody can deputize on your behalf, provided you have given him or her the authority to make those decisions, or if the need arises, should the need arise, then they should step in, and they would be the person who will be deputizing in your place because you're away. Then we look at some of the other types of powers. So referent power, which is based primarily on, it's one of the personal types of powers that you get to see. And here, what you basically see is that the person is able to, exercise their personality and their interpersonal skills. And because of the way you conduct in the organization, the behavior that you show, the attitude that you have, or the charisma or the personality that you have, basically allows you to exercise an informal power or influence over your colleagues or your peers in the organization, and that is referred to as generally the referent power. Now, we can look at these broad types, and the idea would be to try and understand, and as an exercise, see what kind of power do you exercise when you work within your organization or in your place of work. So have you, if I ask you this question, that if you go through these 6 different types, would you be able to recognize what kind of power do you use, or categorization of personal versus positional, and how do you use them? Can you relate them to your way of working within the organization? So if we go through these 5 or 6 different types, would you classify and see as an activity what kind of power do you wield, or let's say exercise when you work within the organization or your place of work? So this could help you understand, some of the bits in terms of how, what kind of working relationships you are able to form, or what kind of personality you take across to your organization, what is your attitude to work, what kind of behavior do you exhibit, and in places or in situations wherein essentially you're required to exercise let's say a decision making that you have to do, then how do you make that decision? Is it purely on the basis of your position, or is it a combination of your position and personal aspects, or is it purely on the basis of your personal attributes? Because sometimes when you work within the organization, if you're not managing anybody, or if you are working as peers and you're working as equals, then in those cases it will be more of personal influence that you'll be using, which will be the use of in particular the 2 different types of expert, which is you have more experience, knowledge, and you're a subject expert, so people will respect you or follow you or take your take your cue on that because you have prior work experience and knowledge in that area. And the second would be looking at referent power, which is primarily or informational power, which will primarily be because of your charisma, your personality, the way you conduct yourself in the organization. So the first aspect of this would be to try and understand the various aspects of leadership, and how various aspects of power and influence, and how it is exercised by leaders or people in leadership positions within an organization. So any questions on this so far? Okay, now let's look at some practical examples of how you would want to understand when leaders need to look at adhering to corporate social responsibility, ethics, and they look at in general the sustainability aspect of it. Now, one of the things that we referred to in the first slide was the 3 models of ethics. So when you look at ethics in general, what we are looking at is sometimes you have to look at taking decisions which are going to be either good or bad. They would be right and wrong, in some cases, when you take decisions, you have to make sure that the decisions that you are taking are, justifiable and they are leading to some sort of a meaningful outcome. Now, when we look at this rationale of decision making at that leadership level, wherein you try and decide whether it will be for greater good or it will cause damage, whether these decisions are right or these are wrong, these are moral, these are unmoral. And when you look at decisions which are primarily done for the greater good, that okay, even if it means that I need to take this decision now, which is going to be a bit harsh, or for example, a bit unjust at this moment, but in the long run will lead to the survival of the organization. And one such dilemma which a lot of leaders face, as you see, we are in a pandemic. So when we are in a pandemic, a lot of organizations are looking at reducing overheads. And one of the clear ways of reducing overheads is that they want to reduce the headcount. Because generally speaking, in most organizations, manpower costs, salaries, wages, incentives, perks, the manpower cost side of things tend to be 30-35% on having an effect, in terms of their bottom line. Now, in order to reduce the, let's say, overheads, one of the clear things which most organizations do in a economic downturn or in recession, or as we are in a pandemic, you would generally see that they will look at reducing the headcount. Now, this decision is if this decision has to be classed as whether this will be a moral decision, whether this will be an ethical decision, if the CEO has to take that decision, that we need to look at this exercise of doing away with, say, if the organization has 1,000 employees, doing away with 300 employees, this task of managing and taking this tough decision to look at releasing or letting the people go, which have worked with your organization for so many, maybe years, months, whatever it is a decision which will require leadership to look at ethical decision making, because whether it's going to be good or bad, yes, if they look at long term, this will ensure survival or sustainability of the organization. So yes, in the short term, the decision is bad because you're making 300 people redundant, but the leader or people in leadership position have to look at long-term decisions or how this is going to impact the business in the long run, and that is where the decision would tend to be a bit will be ethical and moral, because this will ensure the survival of the organization. So I'm not going to put the let's say if I'm the chief executive officer and I have to look at this making this tough decision of making 300 people redundant, I have to consider that if I don't make this decision now, the company might go into administration in 2 months. That would put 1,000 people at risk in terms of losing their livelihood or losing their jobs. So in terms of looking at an option wherein as a leader, as a person who is going to be taking that decision, if I consider this, that okay, laying off 300 people now would sustain would basically allow the organization to sustain for a year-long operations, because we'll be able to make some savings, is a tough one, but is going to be there's going to be a bit of a dilemma between whether it's a right one or a wrong one. But in the long run, if I see and if I put these things into perspective, whether it's good or bad, right or wrong, is moral versus ethical or moral versus unethical, I think at some stage the leader would still need to decide that yes, that's a decision that we need to take in order to look at long-term viability and survival of the organization, and that is where this has to be taken, even if it means this is going to lead to 300 people losing their job. So when we look at this from an aspect of consideration, whether they are good or right, bad or wrong, and whether they are ethical or unethical decisions, you are basically looking at bordering into the consideration of looking at ethics, values, and corporate social responsibility from a point of view of the organization. Now, sometimes, as I mentioned, these decisions, when they are taken, they can be having a positive connotation or they can also have a negative connotation. Even though the decisions being taken are seen as positive, but their meaning in the long run or meaning to some of the stakeholders could mean that they are taken in a negative aspect. And if I have to explain this would say would be by an example, by taking an example, is to say that when we talk about social responsibility, we talk about the organization looking at operating in ways wherein it is able to produce profits, produce goods and services which are going to benefit its consumers. But in the long run, it is using and producing the raw material, and producing the goods which are going to be also environmentally sustainable if they use something as natural resources from the environment. Now, if I look at a positive and a negative meaning of social responsibility, so if I give an example that a chemical company which is responsible, for ensuring that it produces certain goods, but it also looks at ensuring that it is, disposing of the waste material from the factory in a responsible manner, which does not pollute the environment or the surrounding area. So in this case, a decision taken by the chemicals plant to process their waste before they release it to, say, in the local river or whatever it is, before they dispose of it, but they treat it before they are releasing it, is basically taken from an aspect wherein they are socially being aware and they are looking at, working towards conserving the environment, and that's why they treat the waste before they release it so it's unharmful to the environment. But the negative side of this would be that if they look at releasing the waste in the environment without having to, process it or make sure that it does not harm the environment, then what they are focused on more is just generating profits. They don't care about responsibility towards the environment. And this is where, in the future, if this is caught and proven in the court of law, this would mean that the company, though has an agenda of corporate social responsibility, but is not executing that responsibility and is being negligent in the execution of that responsibility. And in those cases, if they are to be fined or they are brought to court and they are asked to, say, for example, look at look at cleaning up, or look at, obviously going back and obviously looking at ensuring that the release of that material does not cause any harm in the environment, would be seen as negative. So although they have an agenda, but their actions do not show that, and because of which their actions are termed as negative, and that could have a negative impact on the company, its reputation, and, in general, say, when I say negative impact, could have a negative impact on its share value. It could be having a negative impact wherein customers stop buying the products. It could have a negative impact in terms of the company being levied with fines, or in some cases, even consumers not taking up their products or shunning their products because they are failing to show any, responsibility towards the environment. Now, in general, when we talk about, the importance of ethics, values, and CSR, in this particular task, what you're going to look at is, because it says critically review. So in this case, we have to talk about the advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons, or benefits, or disadvantages, in order to clarify and cover this point. So there are lots of advantages and disadvantages when you look at CSR. Some of the ones I've classified in a table here. So sometimes when you look at CSR and the company actually, following corporate social responsibility, it provides good value for money for its, products and services, because management workers, are working together, and they're ensuring that they are socially responsible towards the environment, and this creates a good image of the organization in consumers' mind. The other aspect could be that this allows the organization to broaden its future aspects for the business. That means, because the company is socially aware and takes care of the environment, this would mean that when you look at future business coming in from consumers, and if the word spreads around and customers are also happy that this company supports the environment and is, is responsible towards, ensuring that the environment is not harmed, you generally see increased business happening for that company because of the feel-good factor. And an example of this that I could say or give here would be when you look at McDonald's. We have all eaten at McDonald's, or, had a McDonald's burger. Now, generally, when they advertise in various countries globally, you would see their campaigns basically talk about, we secure, goods from local farmers. We have beef coming in from local farmers, ham coming in from local farmers. They normally might not show that quickly in the advert, which is a 20-30 second advert, but the pictures, the visuals they use are basically saying that we are supporting the local farmers in terms of produce. Our potatoes come from, the local farmers. Everything is being, taken locally in order to promote local businesses. Now, what in general this is doing is that the company is ensuring that it is creating an image which basically shows that it cares for its supply chain, and it cares and ensures that its supply chain, which is consisting of partners, suppliers, distributors, are able to have a sustainable business. They also are being given fair value in terms of the price which the company is offering in returns for it goods and services that it buys. And this creates a good image in the mind of consumers, saying that okay, it uses local raw material or local food produce to be able to serve in the restaurants, which helps promote the company's image and shows that they are socially responsible, not just towards the environment, but also towards the community. So it is helping in brand building. Some of the disadvantages that you see when companies don't follow CSR or don't have a CSR agenda. Now, this is something which would be seen from an aspect that if I'm a large business and I have money and resources to be able to put towards that, I would certainly do it. But if I'm a small business, then this adds to money in order to buy or get this goodwill going in the market. It means that I have to give fair price, I can't negotiate, or I have to look at aggressive bargaining tactics, or aggressive credit periods need to be negotiated, which means I'm not being fair with some of my partners and suppliers who provide me goods and services. So here, one of the negatives of CSR is that it basically costs more to the organization to show that they are corporate, following what is called the social responsibility, either towards their suppliers, distributors, or even towards the environment. You would also see that if organizations have this agenda, at some stage they introduce this across the organization, and the idea is that everybody, in terms of employees, partners, suppliers who work directly or indirectly with the organization, have to follow the same agenda in order to put this forward, that the organization is following corporate social responsibility norms. And if you have employees which care, sometimes you would see that within offices you would have a poster. That poster would primarily say that please switch off the PCs or lights when you go, or if you're the last one leaving the office. Now, or put them on standby. The reason why they wanting to do that is they want to be environmentally friendly, reduce the carbon footprint, reduce the footprint in terms of the electricity being used within the offices over the weekend. And if you do not see this as let's say if you do not see this as a bit of an agenda that the company wants to promote, and you do not participate, so this goes to show that as an employee, you are not too bothered about the company actually following corporate social responsibility norms. So in those cases, they are kind of disadvantages, because if it is not led from top down, which is from the leadership down to the the working level, then in some cases you would generally see that employees also shun the agenda, and because of which it leads to a disadvantage that the company does not enjoy a good reputation or good word of mouth in the market with regards to its products and services. So sometimes you would see that there are lots of advantages and disadvantages, but generally speaking, within large organizations today, anyone that you pick off, you would see that the agenda of CSR is pretty much ingrained within the organization, and this agenda of CSR pretty much ingrained follows any will show any or a combination or a few of these in their CSR, which could be, if they are producing or manufacturing organizations, it could be fair trade, triple bottom line. If it's a services organization, it could be ethical management, leadership and decision making. It could be sustainability. It could be work-life balance. If they are companies which are basically social enterprises, then you would see the aspects of work-life balance being maintained. Say for example, more caring nature or providence towards the employees and staff would be there, so that if you are working within a social enterprise, then the company sees, for example, a cooperative or a social enterprise, the company sees that the employees are also a part and parcel of the organization. They are also profit holders. within the organization. If if the individual does well, the organization does well, and if the organization does well, the individuals share the proceeds of that benefit. That benefits all the stakeholders within the organization. So that would help cover your task 4.2. So here essentially, because it's talking about critical review, you would need to talk about the pros and cons. You would need to talk about either the advantages, disadvantages, or pros and cons, whichever way you put it. And that would need to relate to ethics, corporate social responsibility, and how they basically look at exercising this within the organization. You could put in an example towards the end, which would basically cement or basically let's say from an argument's sake point of view, it will basically show your understanding of how this is treated within your place of work or your own organization where you work, and that would be good enough. Now, the last assessment criteria that we want to talk about is basically looking at the impact of leadership on the organization from a concept of sustainable leadership, and what are the trends and what are the concepts which are now accepted widely, and how this is put to practice in organizations. Now, this particular definition or the term, which is called sustainable leadership, was actually coined by United Nations Brundtland Commission, wherein in 1987 it was recognized that meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs would be required in large global transnational multinational organizations. Now, this definition of sustainability also looks at the trends that basically which basically focus on trends which are of current population, and where is the need to actually develop resources, and where is the need for the developed countries to support in the development of underdeveloped countries or third world countries, wherein these basic necessities have to be provided from a point of view of ensuring survival. So when we look at companies essentially taking the onus of benefiting communities and societies in the area in which they operate, so sometimes when you look at a practical example of this, which I'll give you, is sometimes when you look at when a company is looking at opening operations in some countries, some governments then allow them to open operations in remote areas or propose operations that they could open in remote areas or areas which are underdeveloped, is because the development of the factory or the business in that location would create jobs, economic prosperity for the the residents or the citizens of that country, and in return the government gives them a tax holiday, gives them certain perks or benefits. For example, the area or the land to set up a factory in some cases is given free of cost. The government does not charge the company for the land or the area that they require for setting up that plant. The government would give them a tax holiday for 5 years, so that if they are manufacturing and exporting from that location, you would see that the government would generally look at giving tax holiday to the company, wherein either they would pay no tax or a minimal amount of tax, depending on just covering some of the overheads which the government wants to cover. The government might also decide to invest in the operations in order to help the company set up the operations in that area. So when you look at this as a concept, you would generally see that large organizations, they tend to do let's say intense discussions with the governments at the regional level. Now you look at Google, for example, which is setting up, if I'm not wrong, it is setting up wireless hubs in 20 cities in India, because they feel that internet connectivity, which is quite poor in certain areas or regions within in developing world's second largest developing economy, would be providing answers or solutions to a lot of problems which people face. And Google is looking at taking that initiative of setting some of these digital hubs, or basically providing free access or connectivity in certain places, which will enable the rollout of other services which the government wants to roll out in India. Things like digitization of certain services, because it is very hard to reach certain remote areas in India, especially villages. And in order to promote education in general, Google wants to do this. Now, this concept of investing it at some stage within the Indian market is a strategic one, which is taken at the leadership level or at the board level by Google. Now, there would be definitely some ways in which the company would be looking at recouping this investment from the Indian market at some stage, and that would come if they, if they are able to propagate their services. And as you know, Google makes most of the revenue through advertising. So some of these places wherein these hubs will be created, internet connectivity will be provided, there'll be a lot of advertising they will run, and that advertising will primarily allow Google to make or recoup some profits. Now, this kind of a decision making and at the principal level, which will allow public-private partnership to prosper, would normally be done at the very highest end of leadership level. Now, the reason why I've given this example is that when we look at organizations looking at working at such strategic objectives, they also have profitability as an objective. They are looking at returning something to the community. They're also looking at working sustainability towards the environment, but the economic reasons are also involved for the company to be able to make some profits at some point in time. So when we look at this particular concept, wherein you look at this idea of sustainable leadership or leadership coming in to primarily ensure that it is able to work with the community, work and build the required hub or infrastructure by making sure that it is also being environmentally friendly, but in the long run also having economic reasons in mind, is where the triple bottom line concept actually comes in. So when I look at the triple bottom line concept and we look at the the aspect of sustainable leadership, they are quite closely related. And here is where if I see that leaders look at obviously some economic reasons, they look at social reasons, they look at environmental reasons, but what is put forth and in what order of priority they are put forth, would differ depending on the kind of initiative being taken. So in this case, the initiative being taken would be more social, because they're looking at making people more aware and getting people more access to the internet, which would allow services, education, better communication, and in general, the communities to benefit from the benefits of having internet connectivity and being connected with the rest of the world. And at some stage, this is being done in a way wherein obviously they want to make sure that it is environmentally friendly. But in the third step or in the long run, they will be working very closely with the government to ensure that they are able to reclaim this money or recoup this investment back by looking at some of the economic aspects of how the company would be able to make that money which has been invested in terms of infrastructure or giving something to the community. So when we look at this from a point of view of leadership, we look at some of the principles which are also there from a point of view of sustainable principles of leadership, and they would basically be from a Google standpoint of view, they are looking at creating a system which allows Google to get a good footprint or a stronghold within the Indian growing market, which is by looking at creating interconnection of systems for the government. They are also at some stage looking at globally markets wherein they see the profits and the business coming from in certain countries. They will also look at the aspect of how they can look at getting people to be a part of their ecosystem. So if you look at Indian market in general, it's the largest market, which is having 680 million users, which are between the age group of 19 to 35. So it has the youngest population of, let's say, target market-wise, it has the youngest population and a captive base of 680 million, which basically which is where the opportunity Google sees to be able to invest in certain kind of these social projects, which will allow not just them to transform the community, but also help get business in the future from a market which is, the world's second largest growing economy. Now, when you look at this happening and this kind of stance being taken, you would generally see that this is leadership by example. And there are lots of examples that you can pick out when we look at different companies wherein they have done similar things, wherein they've created initiatives in the community, they're returning something back to the environment, they're making sure that the community, people who work, and also the services they provide are all getting the equal proceeds of the, of the business or the output that they produce. So when we look at this, we need to look at understanding the concepts, why they are applied, why, what order of priority in which they are applied. And then when we need to understand that, we relate this to the triple bottom line concept, because most people at the chief executive position or the senior most position within the organization today are being referred or basically looked at from a point of view of what kind of leadership they're driving in the organization. And is it responsible leadership? Is it moral leadership? Is it ethical leadership? Is it just running after profits or driving the organization to make profits? Or is it returning something back to the community or returning something back to the environment and making sure if they are using natural resources, then whether they are producing these goods and services which are economically and environmentally viable for the organization in the long run. So when we draw a point or a case, when we try and make a case between leadership and development, what we are looking at is sometimes you would see that the leadership would need to make decisions which are related to, ensuring that the employees are empowered and the systems in the organization are empowered. So there is where I've looked at my own example, that when I look at leadership and when I look at why we got into this business of, education online and education empowering lives, is because fundamentally I believe that education is the tool which would basically enable people to, realize some of their economic dreams, or it is a means to an end. So if you have good education, education provides you information and power and knowledge gives you power, and that allows you to get the power to achieve your goals. So from some aspect, when I look at leadership and when I look at, development, I look at empowering employees which work within the organization to take an active part by listening into their suggestions and obviously listening into their, positive contributions that they do. And the whole idea is to get to a stage wherein all of us are able to achieve the goals. So whether it's at the employee level, the staff level, the management level, and obviously at the social level, wherein what we are trying to do is make a difference by looking at delivering education, at affordable prices to people globally. So here again, the main aspect is that there is a lot of initiative at the leadership level, which is at the top management level, to ensure that this is a goal that we want to, put forward, and this is the way that we will go about doing it. And this involves buy-in from people or employees within the organization and some of the partner organizations that we work, which allow us to also which basically understand our vision, and that leads to the development of this particular model. Now, when you look at decision making, here the decision making is more done because people believe in the leadership, people believe in the idea, they believe that this is something which is possible. So one of the key characteristics that you would see in leaders is the ability to make decisions. But apart from making decisions, they also have the ability to ensure that people also believe in those decisions. So one of the, a couple of approaches that you generally see that this enables, or why this decision making is enabled, is because people are able to buy into the vision of what the leader is actually, proposing, and they are convinced that this is something which is going to work. And when you are convinced that this is going to work, what you generally see that people will not just be convinced in terms of following you, but they'll also be enthusiastic and passionate about achieving the same goals which the organization or the leader is asking them to achieve. So in this case, they follow the leader, but also respect the decision and the ability to make the decision which the leadership of the organization does, or the leader of the organization does, because they firmly believe that the leader or the person has the experience, the knowledge, and also the the determination to convert that decision making into a reality. And this allows the employees to also buy into that vision of the leader and then follow it meticulously to be able to get that done. So in this particular learning outcome and the assessment criteria 4.3, what you need to be able to do is basically pick up a particular let's say trait which you see within your organization or maybe an organization of interest, and that needs to be related to or should be relatable to one of the concepts, which is the triple bottom line concept, and show how the leadership is making or taking decisions essentially which promotes the concept of sustainability. And this can be done by taking any organization. So if you look at SpaceX, you look at Elon Musk, you look at, for example, Tim Cook, you look at any example that you want to pick out, you will need to look at the annual general report and see what are the major aims and objectives of that organization on corporate social responsibility or sustainability. And within that, find out the role of the leader in terms of promoting that concept of sustainability and CSR and how it is being promoted. So when you look at Nestle, when you look at Procter & Gamble, you look at Unilever, you look at Microsoft, Apple, you'd be able to pick out a clear section from their annual general report which will clearly talk about CSR and ethics side. It might be named as CSR, ethics, or sustainability, but within that, you will need to pick out one particular topic which is where the organization is following that through as a plan, and how is the leadership looking at driving that plan forward is what we need to be able to conclude and obviously review in this particular task. Is that okay? Any questions on today's session before we get on to a small bit of quiz?
No, it's been great so far.
Okay, so let's look at a bit of a broad understanding with 2 or 3 questions on what we've covered today. Now, one of the concepts that we've covered today is the triple bottom line. What are the 3 components of the triple bottom line concept? So what are the 3 aspects of TBL which
environment,
leaders have to account?
financial.
So what are the 3 components of TBL?
Social, environment, and financial.
Yes, so those are the outcomes.
Economic, I think.
Yeah, the 3 components are the 3 P's that we consider in the triple bottom line concept, which is people, profit, and planet. And then you look at the economic, financial, and social aspect of it, which is what they are responsible for. So company would be driving the profit side of things, which is economic. Social would be related to the planet, and people, and environmental will be related to the planet. So those are the 3 effects of what you covered, Bernard. But essentially, what we are looking at is the 3 components. So people, profit, and planet. The effects that or implementation of that tends to be economic, social, and environmental. Now, this particular statement, which is corporate social responsibility, is a voluntary action for companies. Is that true or false? CSR is not, as of now, let's put it this way. So first of all, let's look at the statement. Is CSR a voluntary action or a compulsory action for companies? So in this case, I want to know whether this statement is true or false. Is it a voluntary action? True or false? Yes or no?
I think it is false because it is their responsibility to ensure not just the customers but also on a social platform, correct?
Okay. Any other perspective? Peter, you have said true. Okay. Any reasons why you have said it's true?
I only think of it from the point of the law, maybe in a legal aspect. If
that is correct.
If they're not compelled by law to be responsible, then they can pretty much run the business however they feel.
That is correct. So at this moment, if you look at corporate social responsibility, it is something which companies are not required. There is no legislation across anywhere in the world wherein CSR has to be followed. So CSR has started off as a concept, and it is a voluntary concept which organizations are asked to basically follow. And over the years, what you've seen is that there are different connotations of the CSR concept which have come up, like fair trade, depending on the type of organization, business that you're in. So it's fair trade, it is sustainability, carbon neutral, reducing the waste which is going to landfill. You look at power, say for example, the personal professional life work balance. So it is not, because it is not legal and it is not compulsory, it is still a voluntary action which companies are expected to follow. So this statement is true. The day you see some legislation being brought across, like the Paris climate change of 2016, I think, which US is now signing back to with the new president, Joe Biden. Now, the countries are committing to reducing the carbon footprint by 50% or making it zero by 2050. So when they look at this as a commitment at the national level, you would see that there would be more legislation and law being brought in through legislation, essentially once it's approved by different parliaments or in different countries, how they want to implement. When it becomes compulsory, they will need to be a part of the agenda within the companies and under CSR. And that is where then obviously it will no longer be a voluntary action. It will be a compulsory action. Okay, last but not the least, in this one, which we want to look at, Dow Jones sustainability indexes provide information for. What does the sustainability index at Dow Jones? We know there are different stock exchanges. You have the London Stock Exchange, New York Stock Exchange. You have, the CAC. You have the Hong Kong, Singapore. But in general, when we look at Dow Jones, which is an index primarily within the New York Stock Exchange, and they have a particular index which is called the Sustainability Index. What does this provide information on? Does it provide information on investors who seek quick profits, investors who seek long-term returns, investors who see value in CSR within companies, or marketing promotions for each of their members? Which option is correct? So sustainability index relates to what? So the answer is C in this case, because I think it's quite evident that investors who value corporate social responsibility in companies are participating in a particular index, wherein Dow Jones specifically has what is called the Sustainability Index, and that provides how good the companies are in terms of their corporate social responsibility or moral responsibility towards people, profit, and environment in general when they are measured on this particular index, which is sustainability. Right. So with this, we come to pretty much the end of this particular unit, and we're going to have the assignment discussion session next week. So any questions on today's session so far?
No, nothing, me. Okay,
that's great. Anyone else? Any questions? Gurveen, Isabel, Bernard?
Good for me.
Okay, good stuff. So I have basically shown you some handouts which are up on Moodle, which will be in addition to the presentation that I'm going to upload along with the recording. So these handouts would give you some more additional information about the 3 assessment criteria that we want to look at. In particular, this particular handout, which is like a corporate brochure, but basically is about sustainable leadership. And this is directly related, to the task 4.3. Then if you think of any other questions at any given stage, do feel free to write back to me. And what I will do is we'll catch up next week primarily on, discussing the assignment brief for this particular unit. So thanks for attending. Take care and see you next week.
Thank you.
Great.